I now invite our new member, Jane Baxter, to make the solemn affirmation.
Please repeat after me. I, Jane Baxter,
I, Jane Baxter,
do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm
do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm
that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, her heirs and successors,
that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, her heirs and successors,
according to law.
According to law.
Thank you.
The next item of business is consideration of Business Motion 5145 in the name of Joe Fitzpatrick on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau, setting out a revision to today's business programme. I'd ask any member who wishes to speak against the motion to press the request to speak button now. Nobody has requested to speak against the motion, so I now put the motion to the Chamber. Nobody has asked to speak against the motion. I now put the question to the Chamber. The question is that motion number 5145, in the name of Joe Fitzpatrick, be agreed to. Are we all agreed? The Parliament is therefore agreed. The next item of business is a debate on... we now move to topical questions. Question number 1, Claire Baker.
To ask the Scottish Government what its position is on the reported increase in unconventional gas exploration.
Minister Fergus Ewing.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government believes Scotland needs a diverse energy portfolio to aid resilience and maintain security of our supply. Unconventional gas offers potential as another source of natural gas. It is essential, however, that unconventional gas exploration and extraction is done safely and responsibly with due regard to the environment. The Scottish Environment Protection Agency has recently produced guidance to cover their regulatory roles in relation to coal bed methane and shale gas. We will continue to work with the UK Government and SEPA to ensure a robust regulatory regime in Scotland in relation to unconventional gas exploration and to provide clarity for industry, planning authorities and communities.
Claire Baker.
The Minister will be aware of the reports in the media this weekend regarding concerns over the safety and environmental impact of unconventional gas, and in particular fracking. It is clear from responses that I have received from local authorities there is widespread confusion over what permissions or new licensing is needed if, for example, there is a move from conventional extraction to fracking or from coal-bed methane extraction to shale gas extraction. There is also evidence that there is a widespread use of delegated decision-making. So there is a real risk that fracking will come into Scotland under the radar, with local communities and local authorities not being fully consulted or involved in decision-making. Does the Minister accept the regulatory regime is not robust enough, that it lacks local accountability and scrutiny, and in light of the expected lifting of the UK moratorium, will the Scottish Government, as a matter of urgency, introduce national guidelines?
Minister.
Well, with respect to the member, I don't agree that such confusion exists. It has been made very clear indeed that there is a robust regulatory regime in place, and the nature of this regime has been made clear on numerous occasions. But let me repeat that the licensing of the exploration and development of shale gas and coal-bed methane is a reserved matter for the UK. A petroleum development and exploration licence, PEDAL, is required and is issued by the UK's Energy Directorate, DEC. Following the same process, planning applications to move into the production phase require planning permissions gained through local authority planning processes. Scottish ministers must not and cannot comment on live individual planning applications in respect of their appeal obligations. And therefore, there is a very clear regime of obtaining necessary permissions before anything can happen. Moreover, I am not aware, Presiding Officer, of any application for fracking in Scotland.
Claire Baker.
I have to say the Minister's response is disappointing. Can I assure him that discussions I've had with local authorities, with communities, with environmental campaigners and with the industry themselves all express concerns that there are gaps and uncertainties in the regulatory regime around which is a new energy source, and they're certainly not clear, and I'm quite happy to share the correspondence I've had with the Minister. There's a desperate need for clarity, transparency and robust scrutiny if this energy source is to go forward. There is a cluttered and confusing regulatory regime. It's very difficult for communities to be involved. Elected representatives are being marginalised.
Can we have another question, Speaker?
Does he not accept that there really is a role for greater community involvement?
Minister.
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint the member once again, but I'm afraid I just don't agree with any of that. I think there is total clarity, and above all, Presiding Officer, the approach we take on this and so many other matters must be based strongly on evidence. And it is on evidence that we take our decisions in relation to energy policy.
Bruce Crawford.
The Minister might be aware that I have an application in my own area, as do some others in the Mid-Scotland and Fife and Central area in Scotland. I wonder, in terms of the developments, before they get the go-ahead, do you think, Minister, similar to what's happened with wind farms and renewables, where some of the benefit is retained in the community, that those who are intending and developing these particular facilities, in our case coal-bed methane and not fracking, should consider very strongly contributing to the local community as well as extracting the material themselves?
Minister.
I think that's a very sensible question, Presiding Officer. I entirely agree that it makes good sense for all of those involved in proposing to proceed with energy projects to consult fully and in detail with the local authority and the local community. I commend that approach in the respect of the case which Mr Crawford rightly raises in this place.
William Smith.
Presiding Officer, recently in Moodiesburn, in my constituency, an unconventional gas exploration planning application was withdrawn following significant public objections. In light of these recent press reports, can the Scottish Government give any reassurance that gas extraction will not happen in Moodiesburn against the community's wishes?
Minister.
Well, I can't give assurance in respect of applications that have been submitted, but I'm happy to receive details from the member of the case to which he refers. But it does strike me that if the application has been withdrawn, then there will not be any gas extraction.
Patrick Harvey.
One area where there is a lack of clarity is how local planners are supposed to interpret the aspects of the SEPA guidelines which have to do with the climate change impact of adding to our stocks of fossil fuels. The Minister asked about the evidence. Is it not clear that the evidence is absolutely robust, that the world has dramatically more stocks of known conventional fossil fuels than we can afford to burn if we're remotely serious about our climate change objectives?
Minister.
I doubt there will be a meeting of minds between myself and Mr Harvey on this matter. What I would say is that we will consider very carefully any impact on emissions from the burning and extraction of shale gas and coal bed methane, as we do with all other energy applications.
Angus MacDonald.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Minister, with regard to Petroleum Exploration Development Licence 133, issued by the UK Government and covers part of my constituency, and as we've also heard, has received some media attention over the weekend, what safeguards will be put in place to ensure SEPA monitor consented water discharge points regularly?
Minister.
Well, I thank Mr MacDonald for that question. I'm happy to look into the specific detail, which I haven't looked at in detail, so I don't want to comment without knowing all the facts. But what I would say, and I think for the benefit of all members, many of whom have an interest in this topic, is I think SEPA are to be commended for bringing forward guidance proactively. And anyone who has, as I have done, studied that guidance will see that it is a very considerable aid indeed to everyone who has to deal with interpretation of these matters, whether they be local authorities or others. So I am indebted to SEPA for their approach, but I will correspond or meet with the member if he so wishes, to discuss this particular case.
Sarah Boyett.
One of the key issues people have been raising, Minister, is how the different regulatory regimes join up. And in the context of planning in particular and climate change obligations, is there not an argument in favour of the precautionary principle, particularly in the potential of methane escaping during any of these works and having very severe climate implications, given the strength of methane is significantly more dangerous than CO2?
Minister.
Well, I think that is a view, it's a legitimate view which Sarah Boyack has expressed on this, and I think other matters, namely the espousal of the precautionary principle, I would suggest that that should be considered in the light of the evidence on the matter, and that because this is a method of gas extraction which has not yet taken place in Scotland, or at least not to a significant or recent extent, it is essential, it seems to me, Presiding Officer, that we proceed on the basis of evidence rather than of any other approach based on what people think may be the facts. And I very much hope that all members, even Mr Harvey, who is shaking his head at this point, will agree that that and that alone must be the correct approach on this important matter.
Question number 2, John Mason.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what impact the Jobcentre-Plus system of encouraging work experience is having on its policies that support people into paid employment.
Minister, Angela Const.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As Parliament knows, the Scottish Government does not duplicate services that the UK Government has the responsibility and resources to provide. Therefore, there is no direct impact on the Scottish Government's policies to support young people into work. And indeed, we are trying to make DWP and Scottish Government policies work coherently and effectively in the interests of young unemployed people. However, the Scottish Government does recognise that periods of work experience can be highly valuable to improving the employability and skills of young people. But we have been clear with DWP that these schemes should in no way exploit those who take them up. And we are supportive of voluntary, non-sanctions-based work experience opportunities which do not substitute substantive jobs and which give young people valuable experiences which help them to move towards employment. And we are clearly not supportive of employers who use work experience as a form of cheap and indeed free labour.
John Mason.
Thank you. I thank the Minister for that reply. Clearly, as she has said, work experience is a very good thing, but the Sunday Mail indicated that job centre managers are under pressure to encourage employers to turn paid vacancies into unpaid work experience. Can the Minister tell us if there are any estimates of the number of people filling real jobs in Scotland under the guise of work experience? And can the Scottish Government make urgent representations to Westminster regarding this practice?
Minister.
Let me say to Mr Mason, I'm certainly aware of the article that appeared in the Sunday Mail yesterday and an earlier article in the Daily Record last week. And should these allegations be true, Mr Mason is indeed right that this practice would indeed be scandalous. However, such serious allegations do need to be investigated, and the Department for Work and Pensions has to be given the opportunity to respond. Therefore, I have today written to the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Ian Duncan-Smith, to seek an urgent investigation into these allegations, and I will of course be happy to provide Parliament with details of his response when this is received. And if found to be true, however, in addition to this being scandalous, it would, I think, be very difficult to then estimate how many of the work experience placements to date have actually displaced real job opportunities.
Mr Mason.
I'm very grateful the Minister has already, in fact, written to the Westminster Government. That is excellent. I wonder if she would agree with me that if this is happening, it really is exploitation of people in Scotland who are looking for real work. And I wonder if the Minister agrees that the Jobcentre-Plus and the DWP should be on the side of the job applicants if there are unscrupulous employers out there, and I wonder if the Scottish Government can do anything to offer such protection if the DWP won't. And finally, does the Minister agree that Westminster's record in running the DWP has been very poor, and this is another disadvantage of Scotland remaining in the UK?
Minister.
Presiding Officer, I believe everybody should be on the side of those who are currently seeking work. And I do have a strong belief in the value of work experience for young people. But, as I've already said, such placements have to be voluntary and of a high quality and actually support the young person's move towards and into employment. Employers are, of course, key partners in this regard, and we are, of course, clearly opposed to any form of exploitation. And earlier this year, the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development published a charter and guide for employers on work experience. This is a good quality guide, which is very clear that work experience should not be used to fill actual job vacancies, and I would encourage every employer to apply the guidance contained in this document. On a personal note, in terms of my engagement with DWP staff, I think DWP staff work hard to try and deliver for unemployed people in very difficult circumstances. However, I'm also very clear that where services actually impact on the lives of people in Scotland, that responsibility for those services should lie with this Parliament and no other Parliament.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I remember being quite struck when the Minister for Youth Employment said she was relaxed about unpaid work experience, I think in response to an intervention from Patrick Harvey in the debate last year. I wanted to ask the Minister, she says she wants voluntary and high-quality work experience. I wonder whether she would consider a time limit on work experience, because it's certainly my experience that very often work experience morphs into an unpaid job, and we need to understand the difference between work experience and paid employment. Minister.
I'm surprised that Ms Dugdale would find me relaxed about anything. I can assure her I am not relaxed by instinct. And if I can clarify that quote, it was actually a journalist who had asked me not about a DWP scheme with sanctions, but he had asked me about the principle of work experience. And I had said to that journalist, in terms of work experience, I thought I could have a positive contribution, and in that regard I was relaxed about it. In providing a comment to that journalist, I wasn't actually...
could we get the answer to Ms Dugdale, please?
Yes, indeed. I just felt it was an important point to clarify. I think there is an issue about time limits. Work experience, if you believe in the principles as set out by the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, it should be focused, it should be tailored to the needs of young person. It has to enable them to progress towards and into work. It should be focused on their needs. There should be clear boundaries. And while, I don't think we can be prescriptive about every work experience scheme, I do think I would have some concerns if work experience was continuing for very protracted lengths of period. So I'm minded to support time-limited work experience, although when we're working with individuals, we do need to have some flexibility to the needs of those individuals and employers.
Question number 3, David McCletch.
Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide details of the severance package agreed with the Chief Executive of Creative Scotland, Andrew Dixon, in light of his announcement that he is to leave the organisation in January 2013.
Ms Hislop.
No, as this is the matter for the Board of Creative Scotland, which employs the Chief Executive.
David McCletch.
Well, I'm very disappointed to hear that Cabinet Secretary. I'm not quite sure why the Scottish Government should be complicit in a cover-up of the expenditure of considerable sums of public money. But I think she should also acknowledge, when considering her answer to my last question, that we have now got into a situation where the year of Creative Scotland has turned into the year of destructive or self-destructive Scotland. Now, given that she herself had written to the Board prior to Mr Dixon's announcement outlining her concerns in clear terms, given the broad criticism from the artistic community over recent months of the conduct and policies of Creative Scotland. And given the acknowledgement by the Board of Creative Scotland of serious failings in its organisation and management, does she think that the departure of one man is a sufficient response to all of that?
Cabinet Secretary.
I would also point out that the accounts for Creative Scotland will be published next year, and there will be disclosure quite clearly of the package as part of those accounts, as would be regularly published after the year end on 31st of March. In terms of the agreement with Mr Dixon, that's a confidential matter. I do think the board has been decisive in its actions. It has issued a statement. I'm not sure if the member has seen it. It was published on Friday. It has been well received by the cultural community and by artists commenting that they do think that the board has recognised the issues and they need to move on. The board will change the Creative Scotland's operational structure to use staff knowledge and expertise more effectively. They will establish internal and external forums to allow artists, creative practitioners and staff to contribute to policy development, with long-term funding being offered and changes to the perceived hierarchy in the use of their funding operations. I think this is an opportunity for Creative Scotland to move on. We have a very strong artistic sector in Scotland. We have a very vibrant cultural scene, and I think it's implicit on all of us to make sure that this organisation can move on. Andrew Dixon has taken the step to resign, but I think more has to be done with the organisation, and the board's statement and their actions that they announced on Friday, I think, is a good step forward in that direction and has been recognised by the sector.
Mr McCletch.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Cabinet Secretary, for that answer. Can she confirm that she maintains full confidence in the Board of Creative Scotland, and that following the publication of the internal reviews due to take place on Friday of this week, that she will take all necessary steps to restore the confidence of members of the artistic community in Scotland in the organisation going forward?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, as the member mentioned in his previous question, I have on a number of occasions written to the board setting out my concerns and letters of guidance to them. I made it quite clear in October that I wanted them to sort the concerns out in terms of their operations. They had already, after my discussions with them in June, taken steps to establish the interim report process. Those reports will be published, as he said, on Friday, but what he might not be aware of is a statement on Friday, as in a few days ago, by the board, indicated what actions they were going to take on the back of some of those areas. The interim reports that will be published on Friday coming will set out also actions, specific actions, and I think that's what people expect and require. So I think we can take confidence in the statement by the board on Friday. I think it has been well received by the sector. I think there's a job of work to be done, and I expect that to happen. But we need strong relationships between Creative Scotland and our artists. It has been an issue that has, I think, over many years and before my time as Culture Secretary, and indeed before this time as Government, been a real issue about the relationships between artists and the funding organisation and the wider remit. But I think the steps the board are taking, the tone of the statement, I think is the appropriate way forward, and I think they deserve the support not just of this Parliament but others in taking that action forward.
Ferguson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I would very much agree with the Cabinet Secretary that the response of the Board of Creative Scotland on Friday has been very helpful and has set forward a good course for the body to take itself on. But I wonder why, given the interventions that she made in June and in October, why Creative Scotland couldn't have come to a similar conclusion prior to this, and why it took the resignation of the Chief Executive to bring these changes about. But I'd also be grateful for her assurance that over the period that we're about to face, where the organisation will be without a Chief Executive, without a leader, that there will still be stability and some continuity for those artists and arts organisations that so very much depend on Creative Scotland.
I agree with Patricia Ferguson that stability and continuity is essential. In fact, strong relationships are what helps develop the cultural sector and for the work and dependencies within the artists themselves and within the sector. She makes the points about change. The board had been examining the issues for some time. I think it was important, and I gave evidence to the committee in this Parliament a few months ago, that we should allow the board time to carry out their piece of work. And there was 2 reports that were produced by 2 of the board members, and they have now been considered at length by the board last week. I don't think it took the resignation for these actions to be taken. Indeed, the work of the board has been ongoing for several months. I think what their statements and what they made, the statements they made on Friday, I think were quite definitive. Also were a result of listening. And I think if you are going to listen to the sector, if you are listening to the artists, and indeed, importantly, to many of the staff themselves, they had to have the time to come up with those deliberations. But I would commend everyone to make sure that their statement is read, and I will make sure, Presiding Officer, that the statement from Friday is put in spice to make sure all members